I'd like to invite Senator Peter Courtney to offer a few opening remarks. Peter, as some of you know, is starting his 27th year in the legislature and is the senior-most member of the Oregon Legislative Assembly. This year, he'll also become the longest-serving Senate president in Oregon's history. Last Friday, Peter announced committees for the Oregon State Senate. He named Republican senators as the chairs of 4 different committees, and he evenly balanced the number of Democrats and Republicans on 4 committees, including Finance, Revenue and Business, Transportation, and Economic Development. That means that solutions to issues like kicker reform, tax structure changes, and creating jobs will definitely be a bipartisan activity. Peter's led the legislature through some very challenging times, but done so ably. Please welcome Peter Courtney.
You know, I'd like to thank Pat for the introduction, except there's a problem with it. I was just sitting backstage. They didn't want me out front with these individuals, so they put me backstage. So I'm back there over here with a battery or whatever they got a battery of over there. And here's this laptop. And here's the words that are already printed, which means they were printed before I even got up here. You understand what I'm saying? Now, this is what the words, it says, Pat, thank you, Governor-elect Kitzhaber. Wow, I'm pumped up. I kind of want to get out of here and start getting to work on this stuff. You know, how do you think that made me feel? He doesn't want to be here. You probably don't want to be here. He's all excited about a speech he hadn't even heard. This is not the way to begin, Peter. They also want me to speak right after you've stuffed yourself with food. I've had no food. But I know something about stuffing myself with food. I sleep right after I do it. So here you got the governor. You're filled with food. Take it, Peter. And make us come together and be creative. That's what they said. So I'm not going to use those words, and I'm not going to do all the things that they're going to do. I'm going to talk a little bit about history, and then I'm going to sit down. I'm not going to use the word come together, that phrase. I don't like it. I'm not going to use the word creative. I'm bored and tired of hearing it. I'm going to use some other words. Some of you have heard me say this before, so you're going to hear it again and you're going to act like you're interested. The first wagon on the Oregon Trail was led by John Bridwell. The time they were about to begin, he said, our ignorance of the route was complete. We were ready to start, but no one knew where to go. He said that. I wasn't there, but it's been recorded. He said it. And they left anyway. John Bridwell was 22 years old. We face a new frontier. But I believe we're ready to start, even though no one for sure knows where to go. Bridwell and his wagon train figured it out, and Oregonians have been figuring it out ever since. We rally and we adapt. We adapt, we rally, and we're strong. That is who we are. That is what our past is. Let me give you some examples of what I think amounts to adapting, i.e. being creative, from our history. If you know some of these things, then you be the decider as to whether or not they're relevant. Back during Prohibition, Oregon's wine industry took a different form. In fact, it was much different than today. It was called the Vino Sano wine brick, and it sold like hotcakes, even though its uses were few. The Oregon-made purple cubes were stacked up like cordwood in drugstores behind a sign that said, do not put this in water, do not add sugar, it could turn to wine, this is illegal. I love it, I just love that. Oregonians spent much less on alcohol libations back then, but much more on wine bricks and sugar. That's adaptability, folks. That's the Oregon way. How about Henderson Llewellyn? He packed 2 extra wagons for the trip across the country. He filled them with apple, cherry, pear, plum, and black walnut trees. Have you know that the wagons broke down all the time? Many of the migrants with him said they never again wanted to see a pear or a walnut or anything like that. But get this, William Barlow, the man who built the Barlow Road around Mount Angel, once estimated the resulting value of Llewellyn's trees is well over $1 million. I need not tell you about orchards, what it's meant to Oregon. That was Llewellyn. We are a strong people and we're adaptable. Watch this one. The Oregon Trail, there were fast wagons and there were slow wagons. The fast wagons were pulled by mules, and the slow wagons were pulled by oxen. You got the picture? Mules and oxen. Well, some wagon trains sent the oxen-drawn wagons filled with supplies ahead in the morning, while women and children cleaned up the mess left by the men at the camp before setting up wagons drawn by mules. Before the end of the day, the mule-drawn wagons would overtake the oxen-drawn wagons and get the camp ahead of time, so the women, the rugged, strong women, would have camp set up and dinner ready when the men arrived with their slow supply wagons with the oxen. That's I don't know what that is, workforce development? But I tell you, man, that's a heck of a commentary on us. I sure hope those Oregon Ducks have got a bunch of mules on January 10th. Heck with those oxen from Auburn. I'm not through. Charlie Darky Parkhurst, you'll love this one. Now get this one. Have any of you ever heard of Charlie Darky Parkhurst? He was probably one of the greatest stagecoach drivers in the great state of Oregon, maybe the greatest. He had one eye. But there's a little deal about Charlie. When Charlie finally died, the physician discovered something that startled him. Charlie wasn't a man at all. Charlie was a woman. Charlie was a woman. In fact, Charlie had voted in 1868. He may have been the first woman to vote in this country 54 years before passage of suffrage. Now, folks, there should be a whole lot of applause, at least coming from the women. Stop and think about that. Creativity, adaptability. It's all here in Oregon. Conestoga wagons versus the Perry schooner. Do you know the difference? This is as clever as it gets. The Oregon wagons that came here were not Conestogas. Oh, no. They were much smaller, much smaller. They were only 4 feet by 10 feet. The front wheels were much smaller than the back wheels, and they were on axles. I think you can understand why. The Conestoga wagons would have torn themselves to pieces in our mountains. In addition, they put tar on the bottom of these wagons to forge the rivers. So basically, they created a very maneuverable car, wagon, boat. They also painted them, and I can't figure this out for the life of me, blue and green. The last thing, though, is about rallying together. I heard the governor-elect talk to you about a house. Well, I want to talk to you about a barn. A barn. One of the great pioneer traditions was the barn raising. Families from all around would rally together to help a neighbor build a barn. No farmer and his family could do it alone. It would take literally months and months. So everyone, the entire community, did their part. Everybody had a job in accordance with their talents and their abilities. Some worked on the design, others measured the logs. Those with strong backs did the lifting. Craftsmen did the joining, and just in a day, they could build a barn. Pioneer Lewis Albert Banks wrote about this in the book An Oregon Boyhood. All the neighbors around were invited to come a certain day, and they came very early in the morning. I could see them now coming with big wagons loaded with boys and girls and little children, everybody whistling and singing and shouting. The women went to work with a will to help. The men got to work in good earnest, lifting the big, huge logs into their places. Before the night came, the big barn stood where on the hill that morning there was just a pile of logs. It's time for us to do what the pioneers did. It's time for Oregon to build an old-fashioned barn. Here are Democrats and Republicans. There are business, nonprofits, the faith community, the public, the journalists, all of us. We must rally to rebuild our economy. That will take us. It is a big job. You know, pioneer Peter Burnett wrote back in 1844, "I have never yet before seen a population so industrious, sober, and honest as this here." 1844, we became a state. In 1859, at Champoeg, when they made that vote to become one, it was 1843. And now let me end with this little issue. There is something we can rally about. My staff begged me not to talk about this. There'll be others here that'll be terribly frightened. On January 26th, ballot measures 66 and 67 passed in the state. You all remember that saga. And on November 2nd, there was an election. Both events were remarkable. The pain, the blood, the anger is all there. You know, I talked about being adaptable and rallying Oregon and building a barn. Well, get this. In my opinion, if the labor community and the business community, the nonprofit community and the faith community will take what happened on 66 and 67 and November 2nd and all those bad feelings that are out there and come together around Oregon's tax structure. I am not going to tell you what I think should happen with that tax structure. But I suggest, if they do, Oregonians have already shown with such things as term limits, spending limits, 66, 67, that they will be willing to be the first and the only, as I'm fond of saying about this great state. You want to bring the economy back? You want to make Oregon as great as she can be? That is a cause that I hope will let us forget some of the anger and the hard feelings over what's happened over this last year. I'm fond of saying that Oregon loves to be first or only. Many times you've heard me say that. Let's be first. Let's be first to leave our divides behind. Like John Bradwell said, we were ready to start, but no one knew where to go. Let us be the only state that is willing to start, take a chance, and not wait for a perfect roadmap. Let us be the first state to put our bad feelings behind us. The great Sam Rayburn, he came from Texas. He was the Speaker of the House of Representatives for years back there. He also talked about barn raising. He said the following: any jackass can kick a barn down, but it takes a carpenter to build one. We can be carpenters. We can build the Oregon barn. Thank you very much.